February. Helen has been spending the whole day with me, as she often does, helping me with her skilful needle and with the children, in a very sweet way. I am almost ashamed to indulge in writing down how dearly she seems to love me, and how disposed she is to sit at my feet as a learner, at the very moment I am longing to possess her sweet, gentle temper. But one thing puzzles me in her, and that is the difficulty she finds in getting hold of these simple truths her father used to grope after, but never found till just as he was passing out of the world. It seems as if God had compensated such turbulent, fiery natures as mine by revealing himself to them, for the terrible hours of shame and sorrow through which their sins and follies cause them to pass. I suffer far more than Helen does, suffer bitterly, painfully, but I enjoy tenfold more. For I know whom I have believed, and I cannot doubt that I am truly united to him. Helen is naturally very reserved, but by degrees she has come to talk with me quite frankly. To-day, as we sat together in the nursery, little Raymond snatched a toy from Una, who, as usual, yielded to him without a frown. I called him to me. He came reluctantly. "Raymond, dear," I said, "did you ever see papa snatch anything from me?" He smiled and shook his head. "Well, then, until you see him do it to me, never do it to your sister. Men are gentle and polite to women, and little boys should be gentle and polite to little girls." The children ran off to their play, and Helen said, "Now how different that is from my mother's management with us. She always made us girls yield to the boys. They would not have thought they could go up to bed unless one of us got a candle for them." "That, I suppose, is the reason, then, that Ernest expected me to wait upon him after we were married," I replied. I was a little stiff about yielding to him, for, besides mother's precepts, I was influenced by my father's example. He was so courteous, treating her with as much respect as if she were a queen, and yet with as much love as if she were always a girl. I naturally expected the like from my husband. "You must have been disappointed, then," she said. "Yes, I was. It cost me a good many pouts and tears of which I am now ashamed. And Ernest seldom annoys me now, with the little neglects that I used to make so much of." "Sometimes I think there are no little neglects," said Helen. "It takes less than nothing to annoy us." "And it takes more than everything to please us," I cried. "But Ernest and I had one stronghold to which we always fled in our troublous times, and that was our love for each other. No matter how he provoked me by his little heedless ways, I had to forgive him because I loved him so, and he had to forgive me my faults for the same reason." "I had no idea husbands and wives loved each other so," said Helen. "I thought they just got over it as soon as their cares and troubles came on, and just jogged on together somehow." We both laughed, and she went on. "If I thought I should be as happy as you are, I should be tempted to be married myself." "Ah, I thought your time would come," I cried. "Don't ask me any questions," she said, her pretty face growing prettier with a bright, warm glow. "Give me advice instead. For instance, tell me how I can be sure that if I love a man I shall go on loving him through all the wear and tear of married life, and how I can be sure he can and will go on loving me." "Well, then, setting aside the fact that you are both lovable and loving, I will say this. Happiness, in other words love, in married life is not a mere accident. When the union has been formed, as most Christian unions are, by God himself, it is his intention and his will that it shall prove the unspeakable joy of both husband and wife, and become more and more so from year to year. But we are imperfect creatures, wayward and foolish as little children, horribly unreasonable, selfish, and wilful. We are not capable of enduring the shock of finding at every turn that our idol is made of clay, and that it is prone to tumble off its pedestal and lie in the dust, till we pick it up and set it in its place again. I was struck with Ernest's asking, in the very first prayer he offered in my presence after our marriage, that God would help us love each other. I felt that love was the very foundation on which I was built, and that there was no danger that I should ever fall short in giving my husband all he wanted, in full measure. But as he went on day after day repeating this prayer, and I naturally made it with him, I came to see that this most precious of earthly blessings had been and must be God's gift, and that while we both looked at it in that light, and felt our dependence on him for it, we might safely encounter together all the assaults made upon us by the world, the flesh, and the devil. I believe we owe it to this constant prayer that we have loved each other so uniformly, and with such growing comfort in each other, so that our little discords always have ended in fresh accord, and our love has felt conscious of resting on a rock, and that that rock was the will of God. "It is plain, then," said Helen, "that you and Ernest are sure of one source of happiness as long as you live, whatever vicissitudes you may meet with. I thank you so much for what you have said. The fact is that you have been brought up to carry religion into everything, but I was not. My mother was as good as she was lovely, but I think she felt and taught us to feel that we were to put it on as we did our Sunday clothes, and to wear it, as we did them, carefully and reverently, but with pretty long grave faces. But you mix everything up so, that when I am with you I never know whether you are most like or most unlike other people, and your mother is just so. But you forget that it is to Ernest I owe my best ideas about married life. I don't remember ever talking with my mother or anyone else on the subject. And as to carrying religion into everything, how can one help it if one's religion is a vital part of one's self, not a cloak put on to go to church in, and hang up out of the way against next Sunday?" Helen laughed. She has the merriest yet gentlest little laugh one can imagine. I long to know who it is that has been so fortunate as to touch her heart. March. I know now, and glad I am. The sly little puss is purring at this moment in James's arms. At least I suppose she is, as I have discreetly come up to my room and left them to themselves. So it seems I have had all these worries about Lucy for naught. What made her so fond of James was simply the fact that a friend of his had looked on her with a favourable eye, regarding her as a very proper mother for 4 or 5 children who were in need of a shepherd. Yes, Lucy is going to marry a man so much older than herself that on a pinch he might have been her father. She does it from a sense of duty, she says, and to a nature like hers duty may perhaps suffice, and no cry of the heart have to be stifled in its performance. We are all so happy in the happiness of James and Helen that we are not in the mood to criticize Lucy's decision. I have a strange and most absurd envy when I think what a good time they are having at this moment downstairs, while I sit here alone, vainly wishing I could see more of Ernest. Just as if my happiness were not a deeper, more blessed one than theirs, which must be purged of much dross before it will prove itself to be like fine gold. Yes, I suppose I am as happy in my dear precious husband and children as a wife and mother can be in a world which must not be a real heaven, lest we should love the land we journey through so well as to want to pitch our tents in it for ever, and cease to look and long for the home whither we are bound. James will be married almost immediately, I suppose, as he sails for Syria early in April. How much a missionary and his wife must be to each other when, severing themselves from all they ever loved before, they go forth, hand in hand, not merely to be foreigners in heathen lands, but to be henceforth strangers in their own, should they ever return to it. Helen says, playfully, that she has not a missionary spirit, and is not at all sure that she will go with James, but I don't think that he feels very anxious on that point. March. It does one's heart good to see how happy they are, and it does one's heart good to have one's husband set up in opposition to the goings-on by behaving like a lover himself. End of chapter 22. Recording by Kalinda in Dover, New Hampshire, on July 17th, 2007.